Hi everyone. So in today's session, we will be discussing previous year questions of UGC paper 1 topic of Indian logic. Now Indian logic is part of your logical reasoning subject. All right. It's a very new topic. It was added in the syllabus in the year 2019 when UGC changed this syllabus. So today we'll discuss a few basics regarding Indian logic and then we'll check out the previous year papers. All right. So first, let us talk about basic concepts of Indian logic. What actually is Indian logic? What actually is Indian logic? Indian logic or Indian philosophical system is nothing but the brief, the detailed explanation of how one gets to a particular knowledge, how one can achieve a particular knowledge. It can be based upon your experiences, based upon somebody telling you something, and accordingly it has been divided into several schools. Now, the Indian philosophical system depends very heavily upon Vedas. We all know what Vedas are, right? Vedas, Upanishads. So Indian philosophical system depends very heavily on them. All right. And based on that, there are two different schools. One are called as orthodox or astic, while the other one is heterodox or sorry, heterodox or Gnostic. Now, there are several schools which have been divided based upon the inclination of the people following those schools, inclination of them towards being orthodox or astics or being Gnostics, right? So if you look at different schools that are there, under orthodox, we have five major schools. One is yoga, another one Nyaya, Samakhya, Vaisesika, and Mimamsa, while heterodox have been divided into Charvaka, Jainism, and Buddhism. Now, based upon even the orthodox schools, based upon how much do they follow the Vedas and how much do they interpret in their own terms, this is also divided based upon different schools. All right. Now, as for basic logical systems, even Indian logic has fallacies in it. Has fallacies in it. Now, the Indian fallacies are called as Hetva Bhasha, and major types of Hetva Bhasha or Indian fallacies are Savya Vikara, Viruddha, Asiddha, Sat Pratipagita, and Badhita. Now, this was the basics of Indian logic. Basics of Indian logic. In the syllabus which is given for paper 1 UGC net, what they have mentioned is they have mentioned the very basic terms of Indian logic, and the questions have been coming based on those itself. So today what we will do, we will discuss the previous year questions. We'll try understanding what types of questions are being asked, and we'll try to figure out the answers based upon what we actually know about Indian logic. All right. So let's begin. The first question is, what does the first question say? A perception where we do not have knowledge of an object characterized by any predicate, but an apprehension of unrelated elements. is known as what? So if just based upon the options given, there is something which you can do. You can actually remove two options right there. First one is implication. Implication is when you imply something. When you imply something based on what knowledge you already have. And verbal testimony is something when a person who knows, a person who is knowledgeable in a particular context is talking to you about it. So somebody is giving you a verbal testimony. All right. So these two options can't be the answer. Now, what we are left with are determinate as well as indeterminate perception. Now, let us understand what perception actually means. Perception actually means in Indian logic. Perception is called as pratyaksh in Indian logic. It is known as pratyaksh in Indian logic. Now, what does pratyaksh actually means? Pratyaksh actually refers to the knowledge which you receive by your own sense organs. If you can see something, smell something, hear something, touch something, then knowledge which you receive from those sensory organs is called as pratyaksh. All right. Now, pratyaksh is actually of two different types. One is direct pratyaksh, which is your experience. The other one is your indirect pratyaksh, which is your memory, All right. Now, pratyaksh can be divided into two major types. All right. Now, what are those two major types? Those two major types, the first one is actually determinate perception, which is known as savikalpaka. Savikalpaka. What does savikalpaka means? Savikalpaka is that perception which is rational in nature. It is rational in nature. How do you get determinate perception? What you actually do is you collect information, you divide it into different parts, then you analyze whatsoever knowledge that you have received, and then synthesize the truth, then synthesize the knowledge. All right. The second one is indeterminate indeterminate perception. And indeterminate perception is called as nirvikalpaka. What does nirvikalpaka means? It deals with bare sensation, bare sensation, or simple apprehensions of a particular object, which means the object is present without any characteristic features. It is psychological in nature. So what they have asked in the question, do not have the knowledge of the object characterized by any predicate, but an apprehension of some unrelated elements. So this directly indicates it is an indeterminate perception or nirvikalpika. So the correct answer is B. All right. Moving on to the next question. The next question has a particular statement in it. The hill has smoke because it has fire. Now they want you to tell them what type of fallacy it is. The statement is very clear. The hill has smoke because it has fire. Okay. Now let us see the four different words or objects which they have given in their options. First one is asiddha. What does asiddha means? Asiddha is when you have an unproved middle term. Here, the middle is not proven or is not a is not a established fact. Okay. The next Hetva Bhasha, what they have given is Vyapa the Siddha. What does this term actually means? It means that the Vyapti or relation is conditional. The very basic example which can be given for this particular type of Hetva Bhasha is nothing but something where the conditions can be changed. Conditions can be changed. For example, I'll give you a very basic example which will actually make this question a bit easier. Okay. We all know that when there is a fire, there is a smoke, right? This is an established fact. If there is a fire, there will be a smoke. But have you ever seen a red hot iron ball? Have you? It has no smoke. It has no smoke. So what has actually happened? The relationship between fire and smoke has become conditional. In this case also there is fire, but there is no smoke. So the condition has changed. Similarly, this particular statement has the exact same thing, Okay. It doesn't mean the hill has smoke because it has fire. So there is a condition. Why there is smoke? Because there is fire, right? So there is a conditional basis to it. Therefore, the answer is Vyapasiddhika. Alright. Sadharan and asadharan are basic terms which means simple things as well as not so simple things. And this can be a perception of knowledge, how you perceive something. If it's simply put, sadharan is basic characteristics of something. Asadharan is without those characteristics. Alright. Are we clear? The correct answer is D. The next question has three basic statements in it. All knowable objects are nameable. Okay? They have given all knowable objects are nameable. The second statement is a pot is a knowable object. Okay? Therefore, a pot can be named. Pot is nameable. Very true. It's very basic, right? So what they have actually done in this particular question, what they have actually done, this is a type of Anumana or inference. You are taking knowledge out of certain facts and making it your own. You are inferring something from it, right? You are inferring something, right? Anumana means secondary proof. Secondary proof. We assume, like for example, just take a basic example. What does Anumana means? How do you infer something? If, for example, you see your friend crying, just basics, you see your friend crying or your friend is laughing, you can perceive two things out of it. You can infer two things out of it. The first one, the first inference, if the person is crying, you can say either that particular person is in pain or is very sad. And if the person is laughing, you can infer that the person is happy, right? So you are using something to infer something, right? So that is Anumana or inference. And this is a part of Nyaya school. Okay. Now it is majorly of three major types. The first type is Kevalanyavi. What does this particular term means? Kevalanyavi. What does this particular term means? The middle term is positively related to major term, right? The second one is Kevalav Yatiriki, which is middle term is negatively related to major term. And the third one is Anbya Yatiriki. And this talks about middle term having positive as well as negative relation with major term. So if you check out the options, if you check out what they have given in the particular statement, in the particular question, they have given a very positive relationship, which means the answer is Kevalanyavi, which is option A. The fourth term which they have given is Sheshavat. Sheshavat. What does Sheshavat actually means? It means unperceived cause from a perceived effect. Unperceived cause, unperceived cause from a perceived effect. Now, what does this mean? A very basic example which can be used for Sheshavat is if you see a river which is overflowing, has a lot of water in it, more than the normal level. What you usually say? There must have been rain. Must have been heavy rainfall because of which the water level has risen. So that is Sheshavat. All right. Moving on to the next question. Now, the next question talks about the steps or parts of Indian syllogism. Right? It talks about parts of Indian syllogism. Now, there is one thing that I would want you guys to understand. That is, Aristotle also gave the syllogism, which we study in logical reasoning, right? Everybody has studied categorical syllogism and all those things, right? From there, we got the middle term, major, minor, those terms, we understood that. In Indian logic also, we have syllogism, right? Now, this syllogism has very basic terms in it. And I want you guys to remember these terms because they are asked very frequently in the paper. The first term is proposition. The second term is ground. The third term is illustration. Then you have application. And the final term is conclusion. Now, there are terms for these as well. So preposition is called as pratijina. Ground is known as hetu. Illustration is udaharan. Application is upanaya and conclusion is nigmana. Now, if we look at the statements, we will be easily able to see what is what. First of all, if you check out the E option, therefore Socrates is mortal. It simply feels like a conclusion statement, right? So, conclusion. All right. Socrates is mortal. The first statement which they have given is a preposition, right? Why? Why? Because he is a man. So you're making ground for it. Then what they have said, whoever is a man is a mortal. Example, Pythagoras. They have given an example in it. They have given an example in it. So it becomes illustration. Socrates is a man which who is invariably a mortal is an application or upanaya. So the correct answer becomes fifth, right? Right? So as mentioned in the question, if I could just remove certain things, what I can easily make out, Socrates is mortal. This is what Pratijana is at fifth. So you can put A here, right? Because he is a man, that is Hetu. You can put B here. Whoever is a man is a mortal. Example, C. Socrates is invariably a mortal, that is application, D and E. So what the answer says, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is A. All right. Everybody clear? Perfect. Moving on to the next question. So in this question, they have asked about type of fallacy, which is fire is cold because it is a substance. Now, let us break down the statement first. Fire is cold because it is a substance, right? The major term is cold. Substance is your middle term. Can the existence of cold or hot be perceived by fire? It can only be perceived when you touch it, right? So we reject the middle substance because it contradicts the terms, right? It contradicts, right? So Badita is fallacy of stultified reason where the middle term of an inference is non-existence of major, is when non-existence of major is ascertained by means of some other pramana. Okay. The other fallacy which they have mentioned is viruddha. Viruddha is fallacy of adverse reason. Asadharana and anupsargam are not fallacies. All right. Moving on to the next question. The next question is a very interesting question just because it talks about the concepts based in different schools in Indian psychological systems. Okay. But they talk about almost the exact same thing. Almost the exact same thing. The first term which they have given is nirvana. I guess every person would have heard the term nirvana. Nirvana talks about moksha, when a person becomes unworried about the materialistic things or the worldly things, right? Nirvana is a concept of Buddhism. You attain nirvana when you surpass the urge of having worldly things, right? Then the next term which they have given is neshrayasa. Neshrayasa is the journey one undertakes in the search of themselves. If you want to search the inner self, if you want to search your own inner self, the journey that you takes is nishrayasa. And this is the term given in Upanishads. Okay, It is a term given in Upanishad. Upavarga means salvation. Salvation. And this term is used in Jainism. Moksha means liberation. And the school which follows this particular term is Sankhya. Therefore, the correct answer of this particular question is option A. Alright. Moving on to the next question. Now, what does this next question means? First, let us read this question. Okay. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. Okay. There is smoke in Mr. Verma's chamber. Okay. There must be fire in Mr. Verma's chamber. Now, they want you to find out what type of Indian logic is this? What type of Indian logic is this? Right? The type of Indian logic will only come out when you understand the middle term and the major term in this. The middle term is smoke. The major term is fire, right? It's using smoke and then getting to a particular point, right? Then you are getting to the conclusion. Now, what is this? This is Vyapti. This is Vyapti. What does Vyapti means? Vyapti is the unconditional reason. Unconditional relation between middle and major term. All right. Now, in Indian logic, your middle, major and minor terms have their own name, and you should be knowing the names. Middle term is known as Hetu, while minor term is known as Paksha, while the major term is known as Sadhya. Alright, so the correct answer is Vyapti. Okay, moving on to the next question. Next question they have asked, in order to authenticate the environmental values as advocated by our ancestors, scholars cite examples from Vedas. This means of knowledge used by him or her in terms of Indian logic will be called what? The answer is very simple. What is actually happening? A person is actually mentioning a person who has known about it, who has knowledge about it. So what this actually is, this is verbal testimony or shabda, right? They are quoting people who have knowledge about this particular topic, right? So this is verbal testimony or shabda. The correct option is C. The next question, they have given again concepts as well as they have asked you about the different schools there are. Okay. The first term which is mentioned here is Abhav. Abhav is part of Nyay school. What does Abhav actually means? Abhav actually means is you not having something. And I'll explain this in a very basic manner. Unless and until you had something, you will never understand the feeling of losing something, right? Very basic example, if you have your phone and then you lose it, then you'll feel sad about it, right? So abhav is the part when you do not have your phone. Bhav is the part when you do actually have your phone. So unless and until somebody somebody doesn't have something, they won't understand the feeling of having it. Or if they have never had something, they won't understand the feeling of not having something. So abhav is that concept. Okay. Anuplabdhi, Anuplabdhi belongs to Vedanta school. Anuplabdhi, the basic example of Anuplabdhi can be, think of it in this particular manner. You had one particular book, you kept a particular book on your table and you went out somewhere. When you came back, somebody had removed that book from your table and now you're searching for it. So how will you particularly search for that particular book? You will ask your family members whether they know where that particular book is. That particular form of knowledge is called as anuplabdhi. Knowledge of something which was present in the past but isn't there in the present. Okay. Apoha, Apoha is a Buddhist theory. Now, it's a very descriptive model of cognition. It believes in example, truths, experimentation, finding something out. Okay. Swadavada is a Jain philosophy. Jain philosophy. It explains that any and every judgment is conditional. Everything you believe in, everything that you can think of is based upon conditions which are pledged with it. Okay. So the correct option is C. Moving on to the next question. We have already done this. We have already done this. Now, in this particular question, they have asked about the order. The order. The first one, pratijana or perception. The second one is hetu or ground. The third one is udharan. Then you have upanaya, conclusion. Finally, you have conclusion, which is nigmana. Preposition, ground, illustration, then application, and finally conclusion. All right. So the correct option is B. Answer the second next question is, what is the sequential order of a comprehensible sentence in Nyaya? Comprehensible sentence in Nyaya. So the Nyaya school actually talks about correct thinking with proper argumentation and valid reasoning. Correct thinking. Then you have argumentation, and then you have your valid reasoning. All right. Now, there are two things which you need to understand before we get to comprehensible sentence part. Okay. That is, you have something called as word and then you have something called as sentence. Word signifies an object. Okay. While sentence is combination of words with interrelation. Now, there are four major conditions that go with it. Four major conditions that go with it. Okay. The first condition is akanksha. What does akanksha means? Akanksha means mutual implication or expectancy or expectancy. What does this mean? It means that in a sentence, the words should be related to each other. They should make sense when you put them all together. Okay. Yogyata. Yogyata means should have power to convey sense. It should make the sentence should make some sense. It shouldn't be illogical. It shouldn't be unsensible. Okay. Then you have something called as tatparya. Tatparya, tatparya actually means intention. When you're talking about tatparya, it means intention of the words, while sanidhi means short intervals between words. Short intervals between words. So the correct option, the correct sequence is Akanksha first, Yogyata second, then you have Sanidhi third, and Tatparya should be fourth. So the correct option is B, A, B, D, and C. The next question is to infer rain in the past by perceiving muddy water in the pond. Now, here I want you to understand both the terms which are mentioned in the question. Purvovat Anumana and Sesavat Anumana. Now, what do these actually terms mean? What does Purvovat Anumana actually means? Purvovat Anumana actually means unperceived effect from perceived cause. And Sesavat Anumana means unperceived cause from perceived effect. Now think of it in this particular manner with both the examples. Sesavat Anumana means unperceived cause from perceived effect. If you see muddy road, wet road, overflowing water, then you can think that there would have been rain which would have caused this. And Purvovat Anumana actually is if you see dark clouds in the sky, you'll say that it is about to rain. So you are perceiving something, right? So the correct what they have mentioned in the question is to infer rain in the past by perceiving muddy water. This is nothing but Sesavat Anumana. Okay. Next question. The fallacy or Hetva Bhasha produced in the conclusion due to repudiation of Sadhya by Hetu is known as what? The correct answer is Viruddha, which means contrary, middle, or fallacy of adverse reason. What happens in Viruddha? The middle term, rather than proving the existence of major in minor, proves its non-existence. The very basic example which can be given for this particular type of fallacy is sound is eternal because it is caused. Can the term cause, can just the reason of being caused be enough to keep a sound eternal? No, it does not prove its eternity, right? So that is viruddha. And this is what they have asked in the question. Okay, moving on to the next question is Golden Mountain is fiery because it is smoky. What type of fallacy this is? Now, this question is very interesting in nature just because the first two words which they have mentioned are nothing but an illusion. Are there golden mountains? No, right? There are no golden mountains. So what this actually is, what type of statement they have given? They have given a statement in which the middle term is an illusion, or it's unreal. It's unreal. Golden mountains cannot be unreal. Mountains can be fiery, mountains can be smoky because of fire, but there is nothing called as golden mountain. So this type of fallacy is known as Asraya Siddhi. Asraya Siddhi. Okay. The other fallacy which they have given is Swarupa Siddhi. Swarupa Siddhi. In this, the minor term is real, but middle term cannot be present. Okay, the very basic example of Swarupa Siddhi is sound is a quality because it can be seen. Can you see sound? No, it can be heard. You cannot see sound. So that is Swarupa Siddhi. Okay, Vyaptava Siddhi is when the Vyapti is conditional. We have already discussed this, right? Okay, moving on to the next question. The answer here is Asraya Siddhi. Now, Asiddha is a fallacy when the middle term is what? This is very easy, unproven. Asiddha is called as fallacy of unproven middle or fallacy of unestablished reason. The middle is not yet proven, but it requires to be proved, just like a major term. All right. Now, moving on to the next question. The next question is, which of the following pramanas are accepted by Vaisheshka philosophy? Vaisheshka philosophy. Now, Vaisheshka philosophy has accepted only two pramanas. Only two pramanas. Those two pramanas are perception and inference. In Hindi or Indian logic, we call them as Pratyaksh and Anumana. Pratyaksh and Anumana. The correct answer is A. The next, which of the followings are accepted in Buddhism? The options are Adhasya, Apoha, Abhava, Arthpati, Pratyaksha and Shabda. Right? So, in Buddhism, we all know that Apoha theory has been accepted. They do talk about committing to a cause so that the concepts, the logic, the knowledge behind that particular concept can be brought forward. And secondly, they do accept perception and they think that perception is the most important forms of knowledge. So that means pratyaksh. So the correct answer is C. The next question has talked about statements of upamati as well as of verbal testimony. Now, before we go into this, let us talk a bit about knowledge or buddhi. Okay, there was a sage there was a sage called as Anam Bhatta. He gave a book called Tarka Samgrah. In this book, what he has actually done, he has broken down knowledge or buddhi into classes two different classes. Those two major classes are something called as pratyaksha and anumati. But there are two more sub forms in it. Those two forms are upamiti and shabha. Okay, actually it's shabda. Okay, now let us talk about these four things. Pratyaksh is nothing but perception. Upamiti is comparison. Shabda is verbal testimony, and anumiti is inference. It's inference. Now, in the question, what they have said, the first statement talks about upamati. Upamati is defined as knowledge of relation between a word and its denotation. That's absolutely correct. Upamati talks about the relationship between the characteristics, how you perceive something, how you understand something, and the word with it. For example, a very basic example, if somebody says chair or table, every single one of us can think about a flat surface with four legs on which it is holding, right? So that is a table. But if you put a back support to it, it becomes a chair, right? So when somebody tells you that bring a chair, you will never bring a table, right? You will always bring a chair. So there's a relationship between the word and its denotations. So that is upamati. Absolutely correct. Verbal testimony is statement of a trustworthy person and it coexists in understanding its meaning. That is absolutely true. If some scientist tell you a particular process, or another example, if your mother tells you that this is the recipe to be followed to make one particular dish, your mother is a trustworthy person. She has been cooking for you for a long period of time. So her knowledge will be trustworthy to you. Yes. So verbal testimony is a statement of trustworthy person. That is also correct. So the correct answer is both statements are correct. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Now in this question, they have asked about the characteristics of middle term. Characteristics of middle term are very important because they can always be asked. They can always be asked, and they all have Indian words to them. So first what I'll do, I'll write the Indian logic terms for them and then I'll explain what that particular characteristics actually mean. First one is Paka Adharmata. Then you have Sapak Sattva. विपक्ष सत्व अबद्धता and aviruddha. These are the characteristics of a particular minor term. What does these characters, sorry, of middle term, what does these characteristics mean? Pakadmata means that middle term should be present in minor term. It should be present in minor term. What does sapaksastva means? It should be present in all positive instances in which major is present. In which major is present. Vipaksha means must be present in all negative instances where major is absent. Okay. Abadhita means it should be incompatible with minor term. And aviruddha means it must be qualified. Must be qualified by absence of counteracting reasons which lead to contradictory conclusions. So the correct option, the correct statements which are given are must be present in minor term, absolutely correct. Then must be present in all positive instances where major term is present, absolutely correct. Logical statement which is to be proved, no. Must be present in all negative instances in which major term is absent, absolutely correct. And then it is drawn from preceding proposition, that is absolutely wrong. So where does this leave us? First, second and fourth. The correct option is D. Okay. Moving on to the next one. Now we get to Upanaya in Indian Nyaya syllogism. Correspond to which of the following in Aristotelian syllogism? Now in Aristotelian syllogism, you have three major terms, right? Sorry, you have three terms. You have your major, you have your middle, you have your minor, right? But in Nyaya syllogism, you have five major terms, which we have already discussed. Pratijana, Hetu, Upanaya, Udharana, and then what was the last one, guys? Can anybody tell me what was the last term? What was the last term? The last term was Nigamana, right? So in this question, they have asked about Upanaya. Where does Upanaya stand in the Indian syllogism when it is compared with Aristotelian syllogism, right? Upanaya is interconnected to Udharan or example part, which is connected with Paksha, which is minor premise, minor term. All right. So correct answer is B. Now, moving on to the next question. All things which have smoke have fire. This hill has smoke. Hill, uh, therefore, the hill has fire. Okay. This is one statement. The other one is no non-fiery thing has smoke. This hill has smoke. Therefore, the hill is not non-fiery. What is happening? This is a positive and this is a negative relationship, right? We have already discussed. We have already discussed this. What is this? This is Anavya Vyatriki. It has both positive as well as negative relationship. Middle term is negatively as well as positively related to major term. The correct answer is B. The next question talks about Keval Vitriki and Kevalanyavi. Okay. If you guys remember, we discussed this in the initial part of this session as well. Right? Kevalanyavi talks about positive relation of middle term to major, while Keval Vyatrika talks about negative relation, right? So what does the statement say? Forms an inference when middle term is differential term to minor term, correct? Forms an inference in that when middle term is both positively as well as negatively related. That is wrong. That is Anavya tricky, right? Remember? So the first statement is correct. Second is wrong. Correct answer is C. Okay, next one. Knowledge of relation between name and its object denoted by that name. Denoted by that name is known as what? Verbal testimony, implication, inference, or comparison. It is comparison. Comparison. Comparison talks about similarity. It is defined as that knowledge of relationship between a word and its characteristics or its denotations, right? How you perceive something. If somebody tells you to think about a dog or a cat, there are a few characteristics which will always be there in your head, right? So if you see an animal with those same characteristics, you will be easily able to compare what you know from before and say that that particular animal is a cat or a dog. That is comparison. So the correct answer is D here. Okay. The next question, the hill has smoke which is invariably associated with fire. In terms of Indian logic, what this actually is. What is this? The correct answer is Upanaya. Upanaya. What you are actually doing, you are finding a universal fact. Finding a universal fact which is that smoke and fire are associated together and you are putting them in the present case. So the correct answer is Upanaya. Alright. Now moving on. Now we get to Ashraya Siddha. What they actually are asking you, they are asking you to identify the types of unproven middle. Types of unproven middle. There is one fallacy which talks about unproven middle. That is asiddha. It is also called as fallacy of unestablished reason. Now, a siddha is of three different types. A siddha is of three different types. The first type is called as Ashraya Asiddha. What is Ashraya Asiddha? If the middle term is unreal, if the minor term is unreal, middle term cannot be present. That is Ashraya Siddha. The second type is Swarup Asiddha, which is minor term is not unreal, but middle term cannot be present. And the next one is Vyaptava Siddha, which talks about Vyapti being conditional. So the correct answer is 1, 2, and 3, and they are only given in option A. All right. Now we move on to the next question. In Indian logic, which means of knowledge is drawn from the similarity between two objects? Now, similarity between two objects is comparison, right? Comparison or upamana. The option is A. Okay. Very basic, very simple question. The next one is, what are the conditions which are necessary for Anumana according to classical Indian logic? Right. Now, Anumana is the secondary proof, right? The secondary proof, the secondary knowledge which you are getting. So, the conditions which need to be satisfied, the conditions which are needed to be satisfied in Anumana is, first one, there should be a relation between Hetu and Paksha. Second condition is invariable relation between Hetu and Sadhya. And then third one is establishing Sadhya in Paksha. Now, let us look at the statements which are given in the question. Cognition of Hetu in Paksha or minor term, okay. Relation of invariable concomitance between middle and major term. Cognition of major term in the minor term and cognition of minor term only. Correct option is A and B only. Only these two things are correct. Major and minor term are not related to each other. And you do not need to cognitize the minor term. So the correct answer is A. The next question is, Anil's participation in classroom is indifferent. Anil's participation in classroom is indifferent. Even his parents do not find him active, but his performance in examination ranges from good to outstanding. Therefore, must be studying in private. Now, what is actually happening? If you just think about it in a very basic manner, just think about it in a very basic manner, what is being happening in this particular question? They are implying something. Right? They're implying something. If this is not happening, then for sure the other thing is happening. He's not studying in the class. Even his parents think he's not studying in front of them, but his performance is good. That means he must be studying somewhere else. Right? So that is implication. Right? Implication means arthapati. Arthapati in Indian logic. Okay? The next question is, the distinction between Purvavat and Sesavat is made with reference to which of the following pramana? Now, Purvavat and Sesavat are nothing but types of Anumana. Okay. Purvavat is unperceived effect from perceived cause. Sesavat is absolute opposite to this. Unperceived cause from effect. We have already discussed these before. You remember, if there is dark skies, if there are dark skies or dark clouds are there, that means it is going to rain. That is Purvavat. If you see a muddy road or an overflowing river, that means it has rained before. That is Sesavat. Okay. Correct answer is A, or Anumana. Moving on to the next question, which one of the following is not a sense organ according to classical Indian school of logic? Now, these are very Sanskrit words and based very deeply in Indian philosophical system. Now, Manas means brain, and brain is the region which actually conceives all the relationships or all the signals which you get from your sense organs. Okay, so it is considered as a sense organ. Chakshu is your eyes, how you see something. Shrot is ears, how you hear something, right? So these three are your sense organs. Savikalpika is not a sensory organ. Okay, correct answer is B. Sorry. So moving on to the next question. The water is of the pond is muddy. It must have rained last night. We just had a discussion about it. The correct answer to this is Sesavat. Right? Now, let us move on to the next question. Now, this question talks about philosophical doctrines and the different school where they belong to. Apoha and Abhav, we have already studied before. Apoha was based in Buddhist school. Abhav was based in Nyaya school. Now, Swadavada is a new term. Swadavada, we have actually discussed Swadavada also before. Jainism, every conclusion, every judgment is conditional in nature, right? And Anupalabdhi stems from Vedas. So that's your major schools. The correct answer is B. The next question, which of the following pramanas has been accepted in Buddhism? We have discussed this as well. The correct answer is Pratyaksha. Right? Now, again, sequential order of syllogism. We are not going to do this again. I'm just going to write the numbers. Pratijana first, ground second, Udharan third, Upanayak fourth, Nigamana 5. The correct answer is B. Moving on. Fallacy produced in conclusion due to refutation of Sadhya by Hetu. We have even done this one before. The correct answer is Viruddha. Right? Now, moving on. Which of the following school has not accepted Anumana as a valid source? Not accepted. The correct answer is Charvaka. Charvaka school is a very materialistic, ideological, as well as atheist in nature. And they do believe in some things, but not all of them. Anumana is not one of them. They need their reasons. They need to experience things to understand or to perceive them as knowledge. Okay, so they do not take Anumana as a valid source of knowledge. The next question, fat Krishna Datta eats either during day or night, does not eat during day, therefore fat Krishna Datta eats during night. What they have said, he is not eating during the day, but he is fat, that you can see, right? So fat Krishna Datta eats during night. So they're implying if he is fat, he's not eating during day, that means he surely would be eating at night. So what this actually is, this is implication. Again, this is Arthapati. All right. Next question. The weather is very cold today. What type of Nyaya is this? Now, let us just break down these words first. Samanya Lakshana is perception of an entire class based upon some generic properties. What you are actually doing, you are taking all the things into consideration about something and putting them on a basic pedestal and putting those properties out. Okay. Yogaja talks about perceptions that belongs to yogis who have studied a lot, who have done meditation and moved from the basic plane of life. Janana Lakshana is based upon the past, and Sanikarsha is based upon sensory organs. Now, if you look at the question, it is talking about the weather is very cold today, which can be implied that the weather wasn't cold yesterday or day before yesterday, right? Or week back, 10 days back, month back. It wasn't that cold. So what is actually happening? You're talking about a past. So that is Janana Lakshana. All right. Now, moving on to the next question, you have second member of Nyaya syllogism, which states the reason for establishment of preposition is hetu or ground. We have discussed this several times now, right? Moving on. The next question talks about an argument which is sky flower is fragrant because it is lotus. Example, whichever is lotus is fragrant. That is lotus growing in that pond. Now, what type of fallacy is this? What is actually happening is they have mentioned something called as sky flower, then they have mentioned something called as lotus, and they have mentioned fragrance, right? If you basically look at it, first one which they have given is Swarupa Siddha. Now, what is Swarupa Siddha? Swarupa Siddha is nothing but minor term is real, but major cannot be present with minor. Okay. What does Ashraya Siddha means? Minor is not real. Vyaptava Siddha means Vyapti is conditional in nature. Okay. So the correct answer is Ashraya Siddha, because the minor term which is given in the question, which is sky flower, is not real. Right? Moving on to the next question. Now here again they have asked about types of fallacies and their descriptions. Okay. A Siddha, the basic way which you can remember is a Siddha is unproved middle, and it is a fallacy of unproved middle. So put A over here. Okay. Swavara Bichara is irregular middle, right? Irregular middle. Then Sata Sat Prati- Sat Pratipaksha is something in which in which inferentially, inferentially contradicted middle is present. And Badita is when non-inferentially contradicted middle is present. Now, if you are looking for it, Satya Pratipaksha is middle term is contradicted by another middle term, and Badita is middle term is contradicted by other pramana but not by inference. So the correct answer is D. Okay, moving on to the next question. Now this is a very basic, very philosophical question to think about. Now, what actually happens in Indian philosophical system, every single thing that we think about, that we discussed about, is based upon what we see from our own eyes, right? So that vision is called as darshana. That vision is called as darshana. That's it. Is the most basic definition of what darshana actually is. How you perceive something, how you understand something is based upon what you actually see. So Indian philosophical system has been intensely spiritual. Absolutely correct, because Indian philosophical system has been based upon studying Vedas, right? And it actually emphasizes on need of practical realization of truth, right? So this is absolutely correct. The second statement, the reason which they have given is the word darshana means vision. That is true. And also the instrument of vision, which stands for direct, immediate and intuitive vision of reality. That is true. We see something, that is the only time we realize whether that thing is true or not. So assertion is correct, and the reason is a correct description, the correct conclusion, or the correct reason behind your assertion. So the answer should be A. Let us look at this question. In this question, we have been given two different statements. In Indian philosophies, Nyaya advocates the theory of extrinsic validity of knowledge called as Parata Parmanvat. What does this term actually mean? This term actually is a theory which maintains that the knowledge needs to be validated from an external source. It would be considered as an absolute truth only when something proves it externally. Okay, it defines the subject, the object and itself. It's that kind of knowledge. It is manifestation of how a particular object actually is. Okay, for Mimamsa, the second statement said the Mimamsa advocates self-validity of knowledge but in respect to its origin and ascertainment, right? Now, for Mimamsa, Kumarila was the person who is considered as the person who wrote the first text about Mimamsa school. Okay, so Kumarila always regarded that cognition, cognition of a valid knowledge should be based upon experiments, should be based upon experiment. He said that for a knowledge to be valid, it needs to have a manifestation of its own. Okay, so the correct answer is both statements are correct. Both statements are correct. Now, which pramana is accepted in Vaishika? Which has been accepted in Vaishika? Only two, Pratyaksh and Anumana. Upamana, Shabda, Arthapati are not taken. So the correct answer is A. The next question is, you have to match the different doctrines or concepts with different schools. Okay. Pratyasamapada, Pratyasamapada belongs to Buddhism school, where it talks about the basic processes of life and death. Life and death, basic process. Abhava belongs to Nyaya Visheshika, and it talks about complete annihilation of evil from the life. Complete annihilation. Samyavastha talks in Sankhya school, and it talks about that the world has evolved. The world has evolved from the environment or the prakriti, combining with the self, or the people in it, right? Now, Adhasya belongs to Vedanta school, and it is simply superimposition in terms of mistaken attributes and something which is essential in nature. For example, there are 3-4 things which are superimposing on each other, then they form one piece of knowledge. One piece of knowledge. It is the apparent presentation of attributes of one thing but in another. Okay? So the correct answer is C. Right? So, okay. So this brings us to the end of this discussion. Now, if you guys were there with me from the starting, you would have understand that there are a few topics from which there have been a lot of questions. And I'll be writing down a few topics, and I want you guys to study them before your exam, just so that these terms stay in your mind. The first thing that you guys need to remember is Indian syllogism. This is a very important topic. Different parts of syllogism can be asked and are constantly asked. Okay. Hetvu Bhasha, again, very important topic. Different types of Hetvu Bhashas can be asked, right? The distinction between Aristotelian and Indian syllogism, as well as different doctrines of different schools. These are the topics from where maximum amount of questions come. Please understand, there will be 3 or 4 questions from Indian logic in your paper, right? If you are very lucky, there will be 2 topics, but there is a high chance that you might get 3 or 4 questions from Indian logic. So please start studying Indian logic. It's a new topic. I understand it might be a bit technical remembering all these terms, but what you can actually do, in every single Indian logic book, the examples stay constant. Examples do not change. So learn those examples. They will actually help you in answering the questions. All right. So that's all from me today. And if you have any questions, just send us an email and we'll help you out. Best of luck.